Hello, everyone, and welcome to Synthesis. I am Alexania, your minister. Before we begin, you probably noticed you're not seeing me on camera today. I recently had hip replacement surgery and I'm still recovering, so I'm honoring what my body needs and I'm inviting you simply to listen. As a reminder, at Synthesis Church, we see humanity as a living tapestry, woven from many cultures, traditions, perspectives, and lived experiences. Each one has something to teach us. We explore them not to decide who's right, but to stay curious about what we might discover. And so, what thread shall we pull on today? Well, last month, if you were with me, we began exploring some of the great myths of humanity that have been carried through time. We began with the Odyssey simply because I watched the movie, and it was a story about a man who went to war and who took 10 years to find his way back home. But really, it was the story of a man finding his way home to himself. Today, I want to talk about the story of Job. Now, Job comes from the Hebrew scriptures, and some people understand it as history. Still, others see it as poetry, parable, or myth. And when I say myth, I don't mean something untrue. I mean it's a story that carries a truth about being human. And Job's story asks a question that many of us have asked. How much can one person take? You see, Job was a good man with a family. He had a great business. He was wealthy. He had the respect of his community and he had his health. I mean, he had it all. And then he began to lose everything. He lost his company. He lost his wealth. He lost his family, his children, and eventually he even lost his health. It was just coming and coming. He never seemed to get a break. That's what bothers me about the story. It wasn't simply that Job suffered, because, we all suffer. It was that he continued to suffer. And what point is it enough is the question I started asking. So Job's friends came to be with him, and at first they sat with him in silence, which may have been the most loving thing they could have done. But then they started talking. They told Job that if all of this was happening, he must have done something horrible to cause it. Maybe he'd sinned or failed God. There had to be something wrong with Job because good people weren't supposed to suffer like this. And here's the thing, we still do this today. We've just changed the language. I know I've heard people say, you've created this reality. You attracted this. Karma is a bitch. You need to change your frequency. Now listen, I believe our thoughts and choices affect our lives. I do. And I believe in personal responsibility. But I don't believe that every painful event proves that somebody thought the wrong thought or failed spiritually. Sometimes spiritual advice is simply blame dressed up in prettier words, so be careful of that. Now, maybe Job's friends needed him to be responsible because the alternative was frightening. If Job caused his suffering, they could protect themselves by doing everything right. But if terrible things could happen to a good man, well, then terrible things could happen to them too. So they filled the mystery of what's happening with certainty, even if that certainty meant blaming Job. That's still frightening. I mean, it's frightening to me. I do believe that everything happens for a reason. I was in a car accident, and that car accident led doctors to discover 2 aneurysms in my brain. I didn't know they were there. The accident was awful, but something important came from it, and that saved my life. So for me, everything happened for a reason. What I can't understand is why one person seems to move through life with one piece of good fortune after another, while someone else can barely catch their breath before the next painful thing happens. I'm not speaking only about myself. I look around the world and I don't understand why some people experience so much more suffering than others. I've tried to understand this through my belief that we're God incarnate. Divine consciousness here to physically experience the world God created for itself. From that larger perspective, perhaps an experience isn't good or bad, it's simply an experience. And I do believe that, but it's hard to keep it in the forefront of my mind when shit just keeps happening, right? I can believe I'm divine consciousness having a human experience and still be exhausted by the human experience I'm having. I can believe there's a reason and still be angry that I can't see what that reason is. Both can be true. So, back to the story, eventually God speaks to Job, but he never gives him a clear explanation. Instead, God shows him how vast and mysterious creation is and how much exists beyond one person's understanding, and in this case, Job's understanding. Now, for a long time, I wasn't sure what God was trying to teach Job. I'm actually still not sure that teaching Job was the point. Maybe the story is showing us that life can't always be reduced to a simple answer. Job's friends were certain they understood. Job refused their explanation. He kept questioning. He stayed in conversation with the mystery even while he was angry with it. Maybe that matters. We often think mystery is what makes life frightening, but perhaps mystery is also what makes hope possible. Mystery means there's still something we don't know. There may be more to understand, more to be revealed, and more of the story still to come. Some mysteries may never be solved, but if they can be, well, we'll only discover what they hold if we remain open, right? So I still don't know why Job had to suffer. I don't know why suffering is so uneven. I don't know whether every painful event was planned or whether meaning can emerge from something that was never planned at all. The story ends with Job rebuilding his life. His health, his prosperity, it all returns to him. And he even has a family again. But that family doesn't replace the one he lost. It doesn't make what happened fair, but it tells us the ashes weren't the end of the story. One of my favorite quotes from Brazilian writer Fernando Sabino, who remembered his father Domingos Sabino telling him, "Everything works out in the end. If it hasn't worked out, it isn't the end yet." I don't hear that as a promise that every loss will be restored or that everything will become fair. Job's new life didn't erase the life he lost. But I do hear it as a reminder not to mistake a painful chapter for the whole story. Maybe that's what Job offers us. Not an explanation, not a formula that'll keep us safe. He offers us the possibility that we can live with the mystery without closing ourselves to what may still be revealed. I think hope doesn't solve the mystery. I think hope lives inside it. Because if we know this isn't the way our story ends, we can remain open to the whole story. Thank you for pulling on this thread with me today. And before we part, I'd like to remind you to leave me a simple comment or a question that I could possibly answer the next month. And here's a simple question for you. When life doesn't make sense, can you remain open to what you don't yet know? I'd really love to hear your answer, so share it in the comments. Till next time, here at Synthesis Church, live easy and be kind to yourself.